Hello and welcome to level 6. And in level 6 we'll be looking at maps and we'll be looking at performance indicators. So in this particular section we're going to have a look at maps. So we've been looking at how we can have these 6 different regions: Greater Manchester, Merseyside, South Yorkshire, Tyne and Wear, West Midlands and West Yorkshire being shown in different visualizations. But these, of course, are geographic locations. How can we put them onto a map? Well, there are 2 different types of map. There's there's more than 2, but there's 2 principal ones: map and field map. And this video is all about map. So if I put in map, maximize it down to there, and I'm going to put some information on these worlds. So we've got a location world. So this is your geographic data, but it needn't just be the only geographic data, because you've also got latitude and longitude. Additionally, we've got legend, size, and tooltips. So I'm going to put region name into location, and instantly you can see that the computer has identified that it's part of England, and it's put them in the right sort of place. Now, West Yorkshire obviously is not just a specific location, it's an entire state, it's an entire county. But it's put it into a fairly good location. Now, these interact with other things that we've set up before, like for instance, drill through reports. So if I right and click and drill through, you can see, for instance, this is another way of being able to select areas to have a look at, and in more detail with some of your other visualizations. So I'm going to rename this as maps of admin areas. Now, all of these circles are the same size. We haven't put any values into them. So what I'm going to do is put in the sum of the sales value. So this is the total sales value for all time, and into the size section. And there you can see the size has now changed. So instantly we can see that the Greater Manchester one, biggest, and then West Yorkshire, and then the West Midlands. Now, you are relying on the computer to be able to identify these locations. And it doesn't always work, at least not first time. If you want to be more specific, you can have fields which are latitude and longitude. So these will uniquely identify the place on the planet Earth. We've also got legend. These will change these circles into pie charts. So if I put in the year of date, for instance, then you can see what I'm talking about. Now, again, with pie charts, we've got lots of different values here. Well, we've got 22 different values. I wouldn't recommend using pie charts if you've got more than 6 different values. So maybe instead of putting the year, we'll put the quarter. And then we can see which particular quarter might be the biggest for sales. So here, for instance, in Greater Manchester, in the 3rd quarter, it looks like that is the biggest for sales, and the 1st quarter, the smallest for sales. And then you can visually compare and contrast the size as well as where they are. Now let's put in another example of maps. So I'm going to use some different data from our original spreadsheet. So we'll basically only use the one source of data so far. So I'm going to use this. This shows the number of people in each particular area of Afghanistan. This was just downloaded from Wikipedia or something similar. So let's get the data for this. So get data, Excel, source data, and it's called Afghanistan. And I'm just going to load this data. So it's adding it into the model. I'm not going to be connecting these two together. We'll be looking at connecting different sources of data together in a later part of this course. For now, we're looking at how to visualize data. So if we go to the Afghanistan data, create a new page, and we're going to call this Maps Afghanistan. Okay, so let's drag in the map field. I'll actually just click on the map field rather, and drag it so that's a comfortable size. And I'm going to put the number of people into size, and it has no idea where I'm talking about, so it's just showing me a map of the world. And I'm going to put all of these particular provinces into location. Okay, you can see that we've got a problem. This is meant to be data of Afghanistan, and yet, well, there's a fair bit near Afghanistan. I'm not sure any of them are actually in Afghanistan. Oh, yes, the huge area there. But we've got areas in India and Iran and Oman and Syria and Russia and even one over here in Ireland. So having name by itself may not be the best thing. So I'm going to create one more map. We're going to see how we can improve on the situation in the next video. And this is going to be a map of the US. So again, if I get more data, and we have a look at one called states, and these are the 50 states of the United States, including Hawaii and Alaska, and it shows the population. So I'm going to load that data in. So it's essentially the same sort of information. It does have country. I'm not going to use country at the moment. I'm just going to do exactly what I've done for Afghanistan. I'm going to add a map. I'm going to put the state in location. And you can see that the computer has correctly identified all of these states as being in the United States, whereas it couldn't identify all of these particular areas as being in Afghanistan. And so I'm now going to add in, say, population into size. And there you can see, for instance, California, one of the biggest states by population. New York, yeah, half the size, so Texas, 26 million, so it probably is the biggest state. Just on a visual, what we've got here in the formatting section. So we have got data colors. So we've got a default color, so you can change whichever color you want, or you can have a look at all of the colors and say, I want to change one particular color. If I just expand this a little, you can also see category labels. So if you wanted to show what state it is, I think personally that's just a tad too small. I would prefer as fewer labels, but to actually be able to read them. And again, you can adjust various things like the color and the font. The bubbles, this shows the size of your bubbles relative to a standard. So 1 is the standard, but you can make them all a bit smaller. It's easier to show if I don't have the category labels on, or all of them a bit bigger. So as I say, 1 is the default. Map controls, there are 2 map controls in here. Auto zoom, which is on by default. So that gets you to the right zooming depending on what data you're looking at. But I also like to have the zoom buttons on. They're up here, and they just give a visual indication of how to zoom in and out. So yes, you can use the scroll, and you can just scroll using the mouse left and right and up and down, up north and south, east to west. Use the scroll wheel to go in and out, but I prefer actually to have a visual indication of how to zoom in and out as well. Map styles, There are 5 different map styles. The road map style, this probably makes more sense if I zoom into a particular area, so like California. So here we can see the main highways. So I can change that to an aerial view. So there's California again. Or a grayscale, light, or dark view. Those you would have to have particular use to, especially for the dark. It could be quite illuminating to have a dark background with light foreground, but for me, the road seems standard. Heat map. This changes your bubbles into, well, you can see, smaller things which are darker for the higher values. Now, I need to blow this up to actually be able to see it, so I'll change the radius. Not that high, perhaps. But if you have them overlapping, as in this case, you can see not just which is the biggest state, California, but what is the biggest area. So New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, that sort of area together have a greater number of population than California by itself. So California is the biggest state in terms of population, but it's not necessarily the biggest area. So again, you can change the colors for 0, 50 and 100%. So if you wanted it to go to really dark colors, then you can really see a very contrasting version of where the darker colors are. Standard title at the top, again, it's not very big, so I would center and make it bigger and have a background color. I think I've been using yellow, dark color, a foreground color of black. And all the rest are just your standard formatting controls. Now, there is one control that I have deliberately not shown you, and it's no longer here. And this particular control is much more useful, I think, when we get onto the field map section. So I'm reserving it to a later video. But you may notice now we've got a heat map on that we no longer have the data colors section. So that when I put the heat map back on, it disappears. So I'll return to this data colors section. In the next video, we're going to have a look at how we can help tidy up this particular graph of Afghanistan. To this map of Afghanistan. But unfortunately, it's not very mappy of Afghanistan. It doesn't really look much like. It's centered around a fair area of Afghanistan, but there's bits all over the place. And part of the problem is that the computer doesn't know what all of these names refer to. Now, you could have another example. Suppose you had a data source which had the American states by 2 letters, AL, AR, AZ. Or are they American states? I mean, AL could be Albania, AR, Argentina, CA, Canada. So it's helpful if you were to tell the computer what a particular field has. Now, if I go into our Afghanistan and name 2, in the modeling tab in the older versions, or column tools in the later versions of Power BI, there is this data category section in the properties. And it is here that we can tell the computer, well, this happens to be A. If I say this is a place, well, that's no real different from what the computer has guessed. And you can see all over the place, all these places. If I said there were states or provinces, then that narrows it down significantly. So you can see the vast majority being in Afghanistan, but still a few outside. So with especially non-US, non-Western Europe things, it may be that you have to actually just try a few of these data categories and see what works best Obviously, there will be some where it's completely irrelevant. Continent. The computer goes, oh, this doesn't really look like a continent. And just try and focus on what might work best. So it looks like the state or province works best for this particular data set in Afghanistan. Now, there are a couple of other places that you can set this. So we're currently in the report on the left-hand side. So if I go to the data tab, then we have the raw data. But again, here I can click on a particular column or a particular column over here in the right-hand side, and I can say what this is going to be. So let's make it a city. Or I could go into the model tab, and again, I can find the particular item, and if I go down to the advanced section, so typically you might see this as the default with the advanced closed. If I open up the advanced system section, you can again change the data category. So you've got a couple of other options here. Web URL, so web address, image URL or barcode, but the vast majority of these are to do with maps. So my question to me is, okay, how can I actually get this to work better? Well, the computer doesn't know that these relate to Afghanistan because I haven't told it. And so it's quite properly trying to get places all over the world. So what we really need is an Afghanistan field. Now I can either go back to my original data and add such a field, add such a column to the original data, or I can add one myself. So if I click on ... next to the field name, I'll create a new column. So I can also do this by going into modeling and new column. And this new column, you can see it says column equals. Well, let's call this country, and it's going to equal Afghanistan. Now, I can't really spell Afghanistan well, so what I'm going to do, because it's the same as the source data, I'm just going to make it as the source data name, and then I'm going to put quotation marks around it and click the commit sign, the tick mark, check mark. Right, that's not actually done anything, but what that's done in the data is it's just created a new column which just says Afghanistan all the way down. Now, as I say, I could click on a new column here, and that would do the same thing. And you can see it's being represented over here as well, though there's no actual way to insert an extra column here. Even if I try to get some room, it doesn't work. So, but either way, I have now inserted a constant called country. So what I'm going to do with this constant is I'm going to drag that into the location as well. And the result, you will not be too surprised to see, or you might be, is that there is one single dot on Afghanistan. And the reason for that is that this is now a drill down report. So I can now drill this down further to the next level in the hierarchy, and that gets me back to where I am, where I was before. So what I need to do is not drill down to the next level, but I need to expand one level down. So once I do that, then the computer goes, this is a place where the country is Afghanistan. And now you can see everything has been hopefully correctly identified, going right into the border with Tajikistan, but not quite into it. And if I wanted, I could also categorize this as the country. So the computer knows it's a country or has worked it out. Except I haven't put country, I've put county. Let's change that. This computer's intelligent enough to have worked out Afghanistan is a country, but with maps, it's actually quite useful to actually say this is a particular thing as opposed to uncategorized. And you'll also notice the icon next to it changes as well. So here we have just got an icon which says it's a new column, and instead, when I change it to country stroke region, it now changes to a globe, a map of the world symbol. So it's just an additional helper for me to be able to say, yes, this is geography. So data categorization, it refines the information that Power BI Desktop can use to provide the best visualizations. If you've got certain type of data, then you'll notice some of these are blanked out. So number of people, which is a number. I can't put that as an address or city. I can put it in as a postal code. In America, for instance, postal codes are 5 or 9 digits long, or I could put it in as a barcode. So it will grey out anything that's not relevant. So when you are inserting data, when you're loading data for the first time, which is geographic, then I strongly recommend that you categorize the data so that the computer has a better idea of what it all. So we made this maps US, but whilst these bubbles are good and we had a look at heat maps, wouldn't it be good to actually have the states be filled in a single colour? And this you can do, and that is called a filled map. So very easy, I'm just going to click on this map and I'm going to change the visualization from map to filled map. So now we can see everywhere is filled. Now you may notice that Florida isn't filled. That's because there is actually a deliberate typo in the Florida state that we will use later and find out how to correct it. Obviously the easiest way to correct it would be go back to the data, but sometimes that's not a problem. Now you might be a bit disappointed with this filled map. Yes, it fills it in, but everything's all the same colour. No problem. What we're going to do is we are going to colour it based on the population. So I'm going to drag a population down to the colour, which is, not there. Got location, legend. Could it be in legend? Well, that certainly colours it, let's face it, but it colours it for a different colour for each population. And that's hardly useful. I can't really see that California, for instance, is a bigger colour than Pennsylvania or Rhode Island or something like that. So, no, that's not what we need. But we need some way of adding in the colours. So it must be in formatting. Right, so we've got data colours here, so that's no problem. So we go in here and, we have a default colour, and then we have show all. So we could change these colours individually, but hang on, that means we have to do the analysis. That's not going to actually be useful. How can we change the colours so that it reacts to something like population? Now, in more recent versions, we've got this FX button. So click on that and we get conditional formatting and this new box appears. So we can format based on a color scale or rules or field value. Let's have a look at color scale. This is the more usual one. So I want to do a color scale based on the population, let's say. And it's going to sum the population. There are various options: average, min, max, count distinct, count, and median, and standard deviation variance. If there is none, so for instance Florida is deliberately empty, what should you do? Well, you could say don't format or give it a specific color. So the lowest value is going to be name of color, so we're going to say red. We could also say it's going to be this particular number. That can be useful when you want to, for instance, say any state that's got less than 10 million is going to be the same color. Same for the maximum highest color. So now you can see that there is this differential. we can see that Hawaii is in red, Alaska is in red. Basically, everything's in red apart from Texas, California, and New York is greenish. Okay, what's going on here? Why have we not got more colours? It's because we have such a huge separation of the data. California 38 million, Texas 26 million, New York and Florida, which is at 19 million, and then everything else 12 million and less. So really, having it by a population is not actually going to be of much use. What we really want is to have it by a population ranking, let's say. So let's click on the default color FX and change it from sum of population to sum of population ranking. Now we get a much more useful color scheme. So California is in red. That's because it's ranked 1, which now is the minimum rather than the maximum. So let's change these colors around. So I'll have green going to red. So California is green, and then you can see the most populous states in green and the least populous states in red. Maybe not that much of a differential. I mean, all of these states look roughly the same. We've got Minnesota and Wisconsin and Missouri all in a sort of light green or lime green or something. So what we can do is have a diverging colour set. So essentially, instead of 2 colours, it gives us 3. So we can have as the middle value another colour. And you can see the difference in the colour scheme here. This goes from this sort of green to a greeny red to a red. This one has much more variety. So now when I look at it, for me the colour scheme isn't quite right, but it certainly is more informative. One potential problem with all of this is, of course, colour blindness. 8% of males and a much smaller percentage of females have particular colour blindness. For example, red-green colour blindness, which really, if it's red-green colour blindness, that will make this very difficult to interpret, because this colour, green, a fairly dark green, would be roughly the same as a fairly dark red. It's the amount of darkness. So make sure when you're designing maps, for instance, that you have got some idea of colour blindness in mind, and maybe have a look at simulating colour blindness. There are plenty of websites where you can simulate colour blindness. For example, coloraoracle.org. This is a filter which allows you to change what you're seeing onto the screen for a particular variety of or version of colour blindness. So one possibility could be, instead of making it red-green, make it red-blue. So if I change this to a blue, this will be a lot more visible to people with red-green colour blindness. Examples of other colours you could use. Here we have a website called colorbrewer2.com, and you can see you can have various colour schemes, either multi-hue or single hue, and you'll notice one of those that it doesn't recommend, is red-green. So if I want to show only those which are colourblind safe, you can see that all of them that are shown here are colourblind safe. And here you can see red-green colour blindness affects about 8% of men and 0.4% of women. So it's an important thing. 1 in 12 men would not be able to see well with a red-green chart. So have a look at various ranges that you can use and see which one of these might actually look good for the data that you are trying to present, as well as not showing problems for people with particular color blindness. So aside from this conditional formatting, which is really hidden away with these dots, then there's nothing additional in the formatting for field maps that wasn't there in maps. However, you won't be able to use the field maps with success everywhere. Now, if we go back to our original maps US, everything was in green, so we can change this so that it uses conditional formatting again. So if I just put in the population ranking, you can see that is how you really use color in a map. If I go into Maps Afghanistan, for instance, and try to change that to a field map, in previous versions of Power BI, it didn't know where any of the regions of Afghanistan was, and so the field map came up empty. Now, however, it's getting a better idea of where the regions are. It just hasn't filled them all for my particular map.
Yeah, but
Similarly, if I was to go
you are
into
running
here,
only one bot
our
only for sector one
admins
performer bot, right?
regions, yes, West Midlands is a
Five bots.
region,
But
Greater
then
Manchester is a
how are you
region,
collating
but the
summary
computer,
for
I'm
all five
afraid,
bots?
doesn't
Let's
know
suppose
where those regions
sector
are.
one
It only
input
knows
there is a hundred
specific
of
locations.
you are saying
So
10,000
field
transactions,
maps
right?
can be quite
So
useful, but
let's suppose one
unfortunately,
bot has
Power
picked
BI
one to
is
100
fairly
transaction
limited
and some bot is picking
in
like some
what
other
areas of the
transactions,
world it
and
covers.
you have
However,
to create a
fingers crossed it
summary
covers
report at
your
the end.
area.
So
Give
how?
it a series of products. So remember, go from the widest to the narrowest. So we have categories, and then we have subcategories, and then we have the product, and then maybe we have the product for a particular color. So narrowing down each time. So it's just a way to indicate what a particular hierarchy should be. For instance, if I said, well, the hierarchy is state,
Yeah, so
and
that is
then it
fine.
goes into
I'm saying
country,
like
okay,
once
that's the
like
wrong way
you have
round. It goes
performed
from
all the things,
country
right?
to state.
Let's suppose there
So you
were
can
10,000
state
rows in
the
your Excel,
order
and
of
in
the
10,000 rows,
hierarchy.
like let's suppose
So let's do this for
50
this
was a business,
Afghanistan
let's
model. So
suppose
I'll get rid
2,000
of
was a business exceptions,
country and
some
name
was like
2.
a successful, and some
And
was having
in
application
the
exceptions.
Afghanistan
So at the
source,
end, I
I'm
want
going
a
to create
report,
a
right? So
hierarchy.
having
So
like,
to create a
so
country
the report should
hierarchy,
contains like,
then I can click on it
initially
and go to the
we
dot
have
dot
got
dot,
10,000
or I can right
transactions,
and click on it,
and
both will
out
work,
of that,
and
like
click on
2,000 are business
create
exceptions and
hierarchy.
5,000 are
So this creates a
successful in
hierarchy
this
with
many other
just
application
one field.
exceptions. And
Now, when I want
these
to
are the
add a
updates
second or
that bot
third
has
or
made
fourth
on the
field,
SharePoint
then I
application.
click on the dot
So
dot
how would
dot
you
next
manage
to
that?
it, and I can go to add to hierarchy and then select which particular hierarchy you want. Now, suppose you've got these in the wrong order. It used to be you could just drag them up or down, or I could click the dot 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 and there would be a move up and move down. That's no longer the case. Instead, what you have to do is go into the Model tab on the left-hand side, select the hierarchy. So here I've got the country hierarchy, and in the
So
Properties pane,
let's
so
suppose
expand it if you can't see
we
it,
have transaction in
scroll
queue, right?
down,
So once
and
like
you can
one
see I've
transaction is
got these two
successful, then
different
bot will be
levels,
marking that
country and
transaction as
name
a
2.
success, right?
So I can
And then
drag
when it's
these
business exception, then
up
bot will be
and
marking in
down
queue as a
and then
business exception. And
apply the
this way, like
changes
it will be
when I'm
marking all
done.
the 10,000 transactions as
So now you can
successful or
see
business
that name
exception or
2
application
comes before
exceptions, right?
country.
So at the end, I
Can
want a
move it
report to
down,
be generated by bot.
and
So it
it's
will have
changed
all
back.
the summary
Now
of
I can
today's
also select
from which
another field
starting
or
of
another
today
column to add another
today,
level. So if I
and then
wanted
how many
number
cases
of
the bot
people
has
to be a
input
level,
and what was
and
the
click
status
apply
of
level
that.
changes,
So how will you generate that
then
report?
there it is. And if I want to remove it, I can click on the X, and that gets rid of it from the hierarchy. Now it's important to realize that that doesn't remove it from your overall number of columns that you've got here. It just removes it from the hierarchy. So if I add number of people again, and if I go back into my report view, another way of doing that is by clicking on the dot 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 next to a field you no longer want to be part of a hierarchy, and then delete from model. it just removes it from the hierarchy. So
And where
if
will
I
you write
add
in this
number of
condition then?
people again, and if I go back into my report view, another way of doing that is by clicking on the ... next to a field you no longer want to be part of the hierarchy, and then delete from model. Again, that doesn't remove the original field, it just removes the one which is in the hierarchy. It's a good idea to name this as a particular hierarchy, so this could be like the location hierarchy. Now, this can lead to a problem.
No, so I think
You
this
have
is
got a
already
country
in the
hierarchy
master
here and a
transaction.
country hierarchy here.
But my question is little
What
different.
do
My
you
question
do?
is like,
Do you really want to
let's
have the
suppose
end
we
user
want to run
have
a
two
separate
different
bot
countries
and
to
we call
choose
it
from?
as a like reporter
Most of
bot,
the
right?
time, you
So
probably
we
say
have a
no, that would
bot
just confuse them.
that
And
performs
so,
all
what
the
you
actions.
should do
For example,
is
I
hide
want to build a
all of
reporter
those
bot
measures, all of those
which will calculate how
dimensions,
many of the transaction has
descriptors
been processed
that
today and what was
aren't
the status of
part,
that.
that are now part of the
So how will
hierarchy that you
you
don't want to
do
be
that
part of
using Python?
separate items. So now I can drag the hierarchy into the location, and it works just as we've done before. So previously we had to drag country and then the name in. Now I just need to drag the hierarchy. So I can now drill in, expand all levels, drill out as before. Now there is one particular little thing you do have to bear in mind. Let's say
Then how will you
I
do
go to
that
this
in that
US
get
country,
transaction?
and you'll
So
notice
get
that we've
transaction
got
actually only
country
takes
and state. I'm not currently
new
using country,
steps,
but if I
right?
were to
If I
drag that
just do
in,
then it will make it as in progress and it will return a queue item.
then it would function as a hierarchy. So we've got country and state, but notice that in Afghanistan we've got these little globe symbols, and we haven't for the country and the state.
Yeah.
Now, you may remember that we got these little globe symbols by clicking on a particular item and then going to modeling in the older versions, or column tools in the later versions of Power BI, data category, and saying what sort of category it is, whether it is city, continent, country, county, or that sort. And you can see that at the moment I could change the data categorization. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a hierarchy. So here's my hierarchy with country and state. It's called
Is there any
country hierarchy.
method
Obviously it's
that we can
not. It's,
directly
again,
get a reporter
a
bot
location. So I'm going to
directly
rename that as location
like
hierarchy again. Again, probably a bad idea to have two hierarchies exactly the same name. So I'll call that US location hierarchy. So what I'm going to do,
by
I'm
bot
going to
actually
hide
suppose as
country, I'm going to
you use the
hide
orchestrator
state,
API calling.
and now I want to have these little globes. I want to do the
So I think by
categorization.
that you can
So
use
I'll
it
click on
and
country
use
and
that
I'll go
API
up to
and you
modeling
can
or column tools in
directly
data
get data
category,
from
and
this
I'll
API
click
that
here,
from this many
and
statuses
it's not
from
working.
today's date or
You
any of the date.
cannot
Okay, no problem.
categorize
And have you mentioned like
items which are part of a hierarchy
this
or
was
in the hierarchy.
SharePoint
So what I've
application
got to
was
do
set up
is I've
in
got to
the setting
unhide
environment, right?
all. So
So
that gets me
what if
the
like
country and the state,
this was
and
not set
from the
up in a
country and the
public
state,
environment, like it
there
was set up
I
in
can
your
categorize
specific
country, and you
computer in your
notice
device.
that country is
So
now
then by
categorized in
using
both
bypass,
locations,
what will be the
and
best
state
way
I can
to
categorize,
integrate
and it's
this
only then
SharePoint
that you can
account
hide it.
applications?
An alternative to
I'm saying like
unhide all is
before you were
view
saying this
hidden,
was
and you can
Python,
see the hidden ones there. Now you can
since 66
afterwards
Python, right?
deselect view hidden.
So
Another
what
alternative
if
is
like
to
it was
go
not there
into the
for
model
success
view
application, but
where you can
from
see
your Office
all of the columns
365?
regardless of whether they are
Then
hidden or
how will
not.
you
You can
integrate
click
this
on one,
SharePoint with your UI path?
go down to the advanced section, which may be collapsed when you go into it initially, and then you can change the data category. So hierarchies don't just have to be used for dates, they can be used for anything which goes from a big, wide categorization like country, which contains, in the case of the United States, 50 states, down to the state, down to even closer, like for instance, a city or maybe a county, and it can go further down postal code and so forth. But it can also be used for objects
So is there any way
and anything else that you can have various categorization.